welcome to Life of Etc., a show that covers all aspects of life, relationship, and success. And I'm your host, Dr. Anna Elton. Well, have you ever watched TEDx show and wondered, like, this is awesome, I would love to be on one? Well, this episode is for you. We're going behind the scenes of what it really takes to craft this amazing talk. And we have a special guest. His name is Totten, and he's a master storyteller, entrepreneur, and a former 8 times TEDx licensee and organizer who reviewed thousands of applications and coached over 120 speakers. Those videos have been viewed more than 12 million times around the world. This is awesome, right? He is also a founder of multiple businesses, including one that he started from his garage and grew to a six-figure company. So he's amazing. Thank you for being here. Welcome. And I would love to hear all about your knowledge and story and everything you're willing to share with us tonight.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. And this is exactly why I'm here. When you asked me to join, I was like, I would love to. More people should know because you don't really get to peek behind the curtain that often.
Absolutely. So before we dive, let's talk a little bit. Let's get to know you a little bit more. Okay. So when you think about like one thing that makes a great talk, what would you say?
A great talk is when somebody can deliver it naturally, where it feels like they're just talking to people and connecting with their audience. And surprisingly, that actually takes an immense amount of practice. You have to really memorize so far that it becomes an internalized talk that you can share at any moment with people. And then you get true connection with your audience.
It's so interesting. So before I became a therapist, when I was going through my undergrad in psychology, my job was a makeup artist. So I actually, worked on movie sets, commercials, with major hospitals, all these videos that you see, professional videos behind the scene and everything. So I saw a lot of things, right? So, and I feel like I met a lot of big, important people in hospitals, right? And they give talks, but then when they see camera, they start to freak out, right? And then I remember one instance where this man, he was chatting with me, he was talking with everyone, he was extremely knowledgeable. Okay, I think we lost you there for a second. So he was extremely knowledgeable about the topic, but then when as soon as the camera turned on, he couldn't say anything. So it took us like maybe 2 hours to record this like 4 minute interview. It was amazing. You know what happens when anxiety takes over, right? And I'm just wondering, would the same potentially fear and anxiety take over on stage? Have you seen anyone, stop? I think we're losing connection, but it's okay. We'll still have an amazing show. It's interesting how it always works with technology, right? It's here to support us in the toughest times, and then it creates some difficulties. So, but it's okay. We will be okay. So we'll need to check what's going on. We just need to wait. And
an error that may affect your connection.
I guess we're still live. So it will take us a few minutes to have an amazing speaker to come back. Well, it happens.
I'm so sorry. I do not know what's happening my connection, but
I don't know.
The best laid plans, right?
It is what it is. But I mean, we're here to hear you out, right? So the whole thing is like what I was thinking, like my idea was like, sometimes like you can be prepared, you have all the knowledge, but then you have your blocks, right? You have,
Yes.
something have you seen this on stage when someone like you've been practicing for months and then something happens?
Absolutely. So not unlike what we just experienced here, having this kind of a glitch. It's interesting. The first couple of years, I put on a TEDx conference for 8 years, and we would always do a rehearsal the night before, and then that day do our event. And I had people who did amazing rehearsals, and then they got to the event, and I had every year almost we'd have somebody who would freeze, or they would lose half their talk, or they need to be prompted. And so what we started doing was recording the rehearsals too. So we'd always have a clean video. And that actually, for every single person we did that for, the last couple of years, they've all gone, oh, well, at least I know it's in the can. It's been videotaped. If I do terrible tomorrow, at least I got it tonight. And that usually alleviates their fear. But we try to prepare people so well that by the time they get to that stage, they've practiced it so many times that they're just looking forward to it being the last time they have to give it for a while, and they're super excited. Plus, usually their families in the audience to cheer them on.
That's awesome. So, but let's continue back to the our first section. So, what do you think is the biggest mistake people usually make when they give a talk?
Well, there's two levels here. When they apply to give a talk, the biggest mistake they make is not making the application something they know, where they try
Mhm.
to assume what people might be looking for when the people who are choosing TEDx speakers, and then they sort of tend to choose something either too generic or that's not in their expertise. And then giving the talk, the biggest mistake I see people making is not trusting that the process is going to take 4 to 6 months to properly develop a talk. The goal is to develop a talk that is just an appetizer, less than 10
Mhm.
minutes now is sort of the goal. And they don't work hard enough to develop a talk where every word counts and where they memorize all the words. So when you see a TEDx talk where you click off of it pretty quickly because it's just not that good or it doesn't get into it quickly enough, it's because they haven't properly prepared. So there's a lot of preparation that you and I won't see, but we just end up with a really great video and we don't quite know how they got there. And it's because people are doing a lot of preparation.
And I heard that you guys do a lot of edits, right? How many rounds of edits usually the talk goes through?
Well, it just depends on the speaker, but it depends on how you count edits. But I will tell you that I'm helping with the event that I used to be the organizer for. I'm still one of their coaches, so I'm coaching a speaker there, and I think she's on edit number 10, and we're not even at the end of the second month of edits. So probably it's 12 to 15 edits because you're trying to make every single word count. We're getting to a point where we're dissecting every sentence and every word to make sure that all of them are valuable because TED and TEDx talks have a very specific feeling of their own. There's a reason why they seem so different than standard lectures. It's because they really are. They have personal stories connected, and they're written in such a way that they can be delivered a bit slower, a little more deliberately, with personal stories behind them, and in a way that people will really take each of it to heart. And you also have to grab people right away, either with the title or the very beginning sentences. And so getting to that actually takes a lot longer than you might expect. And it's actually hard to write a shorter talk. There's a famous line, I think it's from Benjamin Franklin, who says, "I would have written a shorter speech, but I didn't have enough time."
It's so interesting. I love that because, and actually, it brings me to the next question because I know like originally TED Talks were like much longer, right? And then right now, I guess because of everything changing, right? And TikToks, right? And um, our capacity to actually, stay connected and pay attention is much lower. So right now, like, what do you think would be the most effective length of this talk?
That's a great question. So TEDx, the main organization in New York, which is run by the organization, there's about 10 to 12 people that work on TEDx and give the licenses out and direct all of the different licensees around the world. And they're telling licensees like what I used to be and the people who are still doing it now that the talk should be less than 10 minutes. Before it was 3 to 18 minutes. You had 3 to 18 minutes to do it. But really they want them less than 10 minutes because they have a lot of analytical data now from people watching their videos, not only on their own website, but also on YouTube. And they know how long people watch and they know how quickly people jump out. And they are telling people less than 10 minutes. I am a gigantic fan of an 8-minute TEDx talk. I think that's the best way. You're just giving an appetizer. Your
Mm-hmm.
goal is not to tell everybody everything, it's to get them interested, excited. And if you're wanting to be a TEDx speaker because you're looking to build your resume and become a thought leader in the world, well, then don't need to give people everything. You want to give them an appetizer and have them seek you out. And it really does happen. I have seen speaker after speaker be able to leverage their TEDx talk into an impressive career, sharing the ideas that are important to them.
That's amazing. So I guess let's take a step back, and I would like to get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll come back to the TED Talks. So how did it all started with
How did my
with
TEDx
TEDx? How did
experience?
you get involved with like
Yeah,
speaking and organizing?
absolutely. It's a great question. I moved to a very small rural community in Central Florida in the United States. Um, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. And even though I was used to living in smaller towns, I moved from a bigger city, Orlando, into a much smaller, quiet town. And I had a friend who I went to, I met a friend. We went to high school at the same time, but didn't know it. We didn't know each other in high school. We were in different grades. But so we had that shared history, and we decided to share an office to do each of our different businesses. And we would talk about what interesting things would we'd like to see in our community. And it's a very small rural community. And we said, wow, TEDx talks are really cool. And it turns out you can get a license. We should just, out of the blue, just try to get a TEDx license. Why not? We were, I was in that phase of my life of just trying everything. If it's something I wanted to do, I would try it. So I put in for a TEDx license. I got denied the first time. I figured out, but not only am I not a quitter, but I love to figure out what makes things work. And I was like, there's got to be something I'm doing wrong. Let me try this again. And I applied again with some changes to my application and understood a little better what they were looking for. And they granted my next license. And so then we did that for 8 years, put a bunch of amazing people from all over the country onto our stage, brought some really amazing ideas to our very small community. But really, that first year, I knew nothing. I had been to one TEDx conference in Orlando and seen how they had done it, but I had never really done anything else. I didn't even know, where do you buy a red circle carpet? Like, how do you where do you get the letters made? Like,
So
how do
where do
you,
you find the carpet?
well, we actually bought a big, gigantic piece of square carpet and cut it into a circle ourselves.
Ah,
But
okay.
you can actually now buy circular red carpets. I mean, I don't know who's doing it. It's a rather niche business, but you can find them.
That's pretty cool. So you had an idea and nothing stopped you, right? There was denial, but they're like, nope, I really want to do it. I'll
Yeah.
get it done. So when you think of your first TEDx, right, to the latest one, so what was the difference?
The difference, and this is going to be surprising, is the family of people that we built around us, because you can't put it on by yourself. There's no way. I'm very fortunate that I have some particular skill that people want to follow me. It's a little dangerous sometimes to think, oh, I could be a despot, and use this for evil. But I am able to get people to believe in a mission that I have forward. I make them believe that I'm going to get this thing done. And so even in that first year, 20 plus people who needed to all be behind the scenes helping to put on this event all came together. They didn't necessarily know if I could even do it, but they came together and we did make it happen. And now we have more than 60 people on our sort of rotating list of team members who help create this event, because we give every single speaker a coach every year. In fact, this year we have more coaches than we needed, so we gave some speakers two coaches. My the successor who came in after me, who's running the place, assigned two coaches for some people, and we have a group of concierge who help put this on, and then we have a loyal following of people who come to pay to come to the event and be part of that day long activity. And I've just gotten people to do some really fun things. We've been able to try things that no one's ever tried before in the TEDx space, and it's just really gratifying when I can say to the team, this year I really want like a punk oboist to play on our stage. And they go out and find me a punk oboist. I didn't even know it was a thing that existed. I just sort of made it up, and they found the guy.
Oh
So
my goodness,
that's so much fun.
that's awesome. So when people apply, how many usually applications you get each year?
That's a really great question. So every TEDx is a little bit different. I will tell you that the first years that we took applications, we only got between 60 and 70 applications.
Which is not
This
bad.
year, yeah, this year in a very short window, less than a month, TEDx Uses had 308 applications. So the interest is growing among people who want to be TEDx speakers. I've heard some TEDx organizations that have their applications open longer. One of them had over 500 applications for essentially 10 to 14 spots on their stage. And I've heard even more for some of the larger organizations. And interestingly enough, some of the larger organizations will get more applications, but they also tend to choose less people from applications because they're also developing people from within their community. So from some bigger communities, they don't necessarily have to pull from applications to get really interesting speakers.
So interesting. So you get so many applications. How do you find the ones that pique your interest? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I always told my curators when I was in charge of that process, especially the last couple of years, I would tell people, our curators, you just read the first sentence. We always asked people, and they continued it this year. We always ask people, describe your idea in one short sentence. No more than 50 or 60 words at the most, and that's too long of a sentence anyway. And you can tell whether it's a generic idea or if the person really has something unique or interesting, because there'll be ones that just stand out. They'll pop out. The ones that don't stand out sound a lot alike, and you get a lot of people wanting to talk about how to overcome fear or the power of resilience or um, things like embrace your passion. And the problem is when you get 100 applications that are all about fear or resilience or passion, they just run together and you really just can't pick any of them. So you really look for the ones that grab your attention. And out of the 308 they had for TEDx Eustis this year, I was one of the readers, and I think we picked about 40 that were really interesting that we wanted to know more about. So it's a little more than 10%.
Interesting. So when you have the idea, you also need to have a story, right? And I feel like sometimes story is even more challenging than the idea itself, right? Because when you think of your life, and most of the time you're kind of like, I'm sure I have some stories to tell, but when you really stop and think, you kind of think like, I don't know if I'm interesting enough, right? To have a story that is big enough to share on the stage. So what type of stories people usually should look for?
Well, I always suggest first of all, I tell my own coaching clients, because now I do help people who are trying to apply and just are trying to navigate this. I talk to them about the fact that whatever story they're going to use to illustrate the idea has to be truly their story. And it needs to come from them having a major amount of expertise in the topic they want to talk about. So if you want to talk about mental health, but you're not a mental health professional, you're not going to get on a TEDx stage. At the same point, if you're going to talk about microbiology, you better be involved in microbiology. Like it's not plausible to tell it to share an idea that you are not an expert in. TEDx organizers want to put experts on their stage. So if you want to tell a story about philanthropy, you better have been a big philanthropist. So, but if that's the case, then there are going to be stories involved there. There's going to be a story. And so what I usually do is we'll sit down with my clients and talk to them about like, okay, so tell me, like what you've done so far with me, how did you get into this? What made you interested in this thing that you want to share with the world as this amazing idea? Why? Why do you care about it? What is it that is so important? And usually at some point there will be, because we are, as humans, we are storytellers, and they will find a story that explains what started it for them. And quite often that can be the story that's most important, or we'll try to find a story that illustrates the point overall in a very in a human way. So to give you a great example, one of my favorite talks from earlier this year at TEDx Eustis by a young woman named Danielle Roberts, and her talk is called "Why Working Harder Isn't Working." And she opens up explaining that she's sitting on the floor of a hospital waiting room answering emails while her mother is actively dying 3 doors down the hall. And she keeps telling herself, just one more email and then I'll go to my mother. But one email turns into three and turns into 3 hours. And eventually she realizes she's spent so much time away from her mother in the hospital because she's so dedicated to her job. That's really even more poignant when her job finally lays her off because of the pandemic after her mother died, and they gave her 3 days of bereavement leave. Now, my point is that story is so valuable because it highlights what she's talking about. This idea of working harder isn't always working. Now, she's not trying to say as a millennial that she doesn't want to work anymore. She's just trying to say that there has to be purpose in that work. And then she goes on to cite amazing amounts of data and other things that really help to push her point and show what's important to millennials right now. But at the same point, it's such a personal story that she's willing to open up that the audience is immediately grabbed from the beginning. And it's done really great in terms of organic reach on YouTube because she tells such a personal story.
Um, so that story was really personal, really deep, right? But also, traumatic, right? It was really hard to open up. So from your experience, what do you think does well? Like, is it like more personal, dramatic stories? Is it like more humor works well? It really depends on the story and I guess I don't know, audience.
Well, I think that people, I think just as if you go to the Cineplex or the movie theater and look at what's showing, it's always a mix of things, right?
The
like
roller
there's always
coaster,
like
right?
superhero movies, there's comedies, there's
Mhm,
romance, there's whatever else. So I can't tell anyone what exactly story they have to tell,
mhm,
but I will tell you, humor cuts through so beautifully. In fact, even when you're just telling a story that maybe you're trying to just tell a rather dry subject. The Four Phases of Retirement by Riley Moynes. He gave his talk at TEDx Surrey a couple of years ago. His talk weaves comedy so well, and then what he's talking about is the things you need to be aware of when you're going to retire. It's a dry subject. He's a professor, but he weaves humor through his talk in such a way that like I want to be his friend. I want to talk to this old guy in a sweater vest who's already retired and it's telling you out what it's like to do that. And it's such an effective way. Like those humor is so valuable. Those That personal story that she shared obviously was so emotional, but she also puts humor for Danielle. She still puts humor in her talk. Um, it, Humor is very important, and people forget that about TEDx. Now, I will tell you, if you're not a humorous person, you don't have to try to wedge humor in there. But I want to see your humanity in some way, and that's going to help you connect with the
That's so interesting. So what I was thinking is the like roller coaster of emotions, right? If you have, the really personal, deep talk, right? Like maybe
audience.
you
Yes.
can, throw some jokes here and there, right? Some
It's so
reflection.
funny you say that because I use the metaphor of a roller coaster uh, to the people I'm coaching, whether it's when I was with TEDx fully as the licensee and I was coaching everybody, or now when I coach individuals, is you have to create a roller coaster. Like that audience is there, whether they know it or not, to go on a ride with you, and they're actually pretty safe because you could be telling them a story about where you're in immense danger, where there's a chance that you won't succeed, and spoiler alert, you're on a TEDx stage at the moment. They're pretty sure that you're not going to take them anywhere too dangerous and that you're going to succeed because you're on a TEDx stage.
Hmm.
So you have the ability to really take people up and down on that crazy roller coaster. And that's what's so fulfilling too when you get to the end of a talk and you're like, oh, and then you get sort of a call to action at the end. It's so effective.
I love that. So another thing I was thinking, so you have all this, professors, right, important people, but what if someone is, let's say, hairdresser or makeup artist or I don't know, something, I guess, mom, and
Sure.
they have a story to share, they have an idea, like, do you think, and they're thinking maybe my idea is not worth their while, maybe they're looking only for doctors, professors, and so on. So what do you think? What would you say? What advice would you give for them?
This is such a great question because the truth is, people would often tell me, "Oh, did you see that TED talk by Al Gore or by Bill Gates?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And did you see the one from the young man from that African country who built a windmill to pull water out of the ground using old bicycle parts? I mean, like, it does not require you to be world famous or to be some credentialed person to give a talk. Now, if you're going to give a talk about the effects of malaria on the sub-Saharan African, uh, you know, uh, population, then you better have done some research into that and be active in it. That's not going to help for you to do that. But if you're giving a talk about what it's like to be a mom and when some amazing truth you found out about that, you also better be a mom. So there are there are interesting and important ideas in all walks of life. You do not have to be necessarily just somebody credentialed. And I'll tell you, and this is probably a little thing that some of your viewers won't want to hear. The worst TEDx speakers to coach are the know-it-alls that normally give talks all the time and are used to winging it and just going off a couple of notes. In fact, if somebody tells me that they're a professional speaker, or oh, I speak places all the time, or I'm a surgeon and I have to talk to groups all the time, so I can do this, I know they're going to go way over the time limit. They're not going to follow the script. I'm never going to get the same talk twice from them, and they're going to change their mind partway through and decide to give a whole different talk. So those are the hardest ones. I prefer somebody who says, I don't like speaking in public, and I don't know that people really should want to listen to me. And I'm like, no, no, actually, what you have to say is super important. So, absolutely, they should keep going at it as long as they have an idea that's worth spreading.
That's amazing. So where do you think they should start? So they have potential idea and then they send an application. So when they apply for TED Talk, right? Do they need to maybe pre-record the video, a couple of minutes, right? Do they need to write the whole script? Like how much of preparation needs to be done when they actually apply? Because all these different applications, right, they have different requirements.
That is such a good question. Let me tell you this. This is an interesting part. So TEDx, the main organization, doesn't really give guidelines for this. They don't tell TEDx organizers how to run an application process because, frankly, they'd rather we didn't use them. Sometimes they sort of prefer we'd go find people on our own. But the hard part is you, in a small community, you can't always go find 12 people every year who have a new idea and want to actually share it on your stage. So applications are a thing. There's nothing wrong with them. The detail is, though, the thing is that they're not always the same, and it's hard to figure out what to do to to apply in an appropriate way that's going to be useful. And the other part is if you imagine these are all volunteers who are TEDx organizers and curators. If they get 300 or 500 applications, they don't have time to explain to everybody why they didn't get selected. So in fact, you could apply to 10 places and never know why you've been rejected each time. It's one of the reasons why I decided to become an independent coach and help people because I'm just the idea of people banging their head against the wall trying to become a TEDx speaker, not knowing what's going on. The waste of human time seems crazy to me. So I want to help people. So let me give you a couple of details of what you should do. First, you've got to find out where those events are going to be and how to apply for them. You can go to the TED.com website and choose attend a TEDx event, and you can get an idea which ones are coming up. There's also people who print that stuff. I put out a newsletter that says when they're coming up in the future. So you can find out in different ways. Then I'm going to suggest that you read the application very carefully and answer the questions they ask you in the way they ask you to answer them, because that shows that you're coachable and that you read instructions. Now, even if they do not ask you to include a video, which some of them do and some of them don't, I would record a short 1 to 2 minute video explaining your idea, but mostly to show your personality. I think it's super important to show that you're a friendly, kind, interesting person. And then you can add that just a short link to it on an unlisted YouTube video. You can share that short link to your unlisted YouTube video right in your application. It's just one little sentence. Here's an introductory video of me, the link. I encourage people to write the first draft of their talk. Even if it takes you 6 drafts to get a good first draft, you should call it your first draft, make it a Google document or somewhere else, make sure it's open to anybody who has the link, and then put a link to that also in your application. The reason I say that is not everyone's going to do that. So if you do that and the organizer clicks on it and looks at it, you're going to have a step up against other people who haven't done that. And you look, as long as you call it, here's my first draft, you look like somebody who's done some extra preparation, but is also coachable because it's just a first draft and you realize that it's going to be changed over time.
So interesting. It's such a cognitive dissonance, right? You're saying like you need to follow the instructions, but you can have to like all these extra things, right? And I feel like a lot of people say like if I follow instructions, black and white, right? I need to do these things. And not a lot of people even realize and that they need to add extra. So another thing I was thinking, so as a researcher, right, I always like do the research and I always look for the studies. So, and I know TED Talks are evidence-based, right? You always need to prove your point with your reviewed articles. So when you craft this draft, do you add the research in or that's something that can be added later? Is it just like kind of your idea without any support or it needs to be with the support?
It depends upon how academic your talk is going to be. So if you're giving a talk that's based in an academic situation and you need to show that evidence, then absolutely you should just make comments. Like you could say, according to a 2024 study by, whoever, this. That's clearly you're citing it. You can also cite your research sort of in footnotes of a talk, especially research-based talk. And it really helps if you've actually done the research too. Like if you're citing a research paper that you yourself wrote, or maybe some actual research that you did, that's actually quite helpful as well. I will tell you that it's harder today to get research talks about science and other research-based things through because TEDx is putting a lot of disclaimers on those videos when they get to YouTube, which might offend some serious researchers who feel like they shouldn't be questioned. But I think TEDx has potentially been a little bit worried about people thinking that the claim is being made by TEDx rather than by the person giving the talk. So there's a little bit of a fine line to walk there. But I will tell you, I prefer over a touchy feely life gets better talk all day long. Not only because I just think it's more appropriate for the stage, but it's also means you have less competition because there's a lot.
Mhm. I see. So, what are some of the things that you would tell people not to do? Absolutely never do this.
One, never ever circumvent the way that a TEDx organizer has already provided you to reach out to them. In other words, don't listen to anyone who says, "Hey, here's a secret. Find that TEDx organizer on LinkedIn and then send them an email on LinkedIn." Especially if that TEDx organizer has on their website a clear way for you to apply to be at their event. These are volunteers putting on this event and flooding their inbox on other social media to say, "Hey, I have a great idea. You should listen to it here." When they have a process for that, just shows that you are not willing to follow the rules. That's my personal pet
Hmm.
peeve. And I have blacklisted people uh, who have done that in the past to me. And then also, don't wait until 2 months before someone's event to ask them if they need a speaker. This is a 6 month preparation process. You need to be looking 6 to 8 months out because there's no way I would ever put somebody on a stage who's had less than 2 months worth of practice. If we lost a speaker in the last 2 months, we just didn't put that person on the stage. We didn't try to replace them with someone else because the other person will be at a disadvantage and then we're going to look bad because they're going to be an unprepared person on our stage and our audience doesn't need that. I think from other mistakes, I have seen people who don't realize that the idea that they're trying to suggest or to share with the world, it has to require defending. A good TEDx idea requires defending. So if you say to me the equivalent of the grass is green and the sky is blue, I'm going to say that's great. That's not an idea. That's a fact. We already know that. It's not worth. It doesn't require defending. If you say to me as a certified financial professional that you want to tell people from the stage that they should delete their budgeting app right now, well, I have to know what that means. That requires defending. Why would you tell people to no longer budget their money? And that's actually a speaker who's going to be on the TEDx Eustace stage next February because he has such a compelling idea that requires defending.
So interesting. So, you mentioned that sometimes you lose speakers. So, what happens? Like, you made it this far, right? And then what happens?
Well, okay, you're really good at this because that was just a little nugget and you grabbed onto the most interesting thing. We have every single year that I was the organizer of TEDx Eustace, we lost a speaker. We either lost a speaker or we fired them. So I'll give you an idea what that means. And these are not people we paid. So, a
Mhm.
volunteer. We basically told this person who wanted to be a speaker, sorry, you're out. Our very first year, we had a person who pitched an idea to us about all of the reasons why we should stop treating infertile people as if they're inferior or less than or incapable or somehow disabled. And I loved that conversation because I wanted that speaker to share with a general audience what it's like for that person who is infertile to have to constantly hear, "Well, when are you going to have a baby? Aren't you going to have babies? Aren't you feeling like you should have babies by now?" And how difficult that conversation is. And unfortunately, this speaker, the first draft that we got was like perfect for an infertility conference, but it wasn't written to a general audience. So a TEDx audience is a general audience. In fact, I explained to the speaker, you're going to be talking to a lot of very fertile people. Many of them may have 4, 5, and 6 children. Like, what are you sharing with them that they need to know? This is not a, but that person could never get past wanting to speak only to infertile people. So we fired them. That's been a long time ago. I'm pretty sure that person has since been able to figure out where to speak. We had one person who just wanted to talk about politics the entire time and how they hated the current president. That was many years ago, and that was sort of unfortunate. We had another speaker who only wanted to reuse a talk they'd already given somewhere else because they'd already kind of memorized it, and why should they write another one? And then we had one who had a heart attack a week before the event and was literally in the hospital up until the day before our event, and we told her, you're not coming to the stage. We'll put you on next year. You just have to wait
Mhm.
till next year. And she did. We had her
Mhm.
back the next year. And her talk was so effective. And in fact, she said the extra time to prepare was actually better for her. We really appreciated that and sort of got the TEDx experience twice. So, yeah, every year. Now, this year, the speakers are so good. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody faltering, which makes me wonder, is that because I was the leader before and we lost somebody every year? But,
Well,
maybe this is the year that changes it.
that's awesome. So hopefully, this year will be, the perfect amount of
Yeah.
speakers.
Yeah.
So, I actually heard the story last year that, there was this speaker who was preparing, and then when they went on stage, they actually gave the completely different talk that they were preparing this whole time. Is it something that you ever experienced in your career?
That's funny. And this talk ended up good to being perfectly fine. We had a speaker in our very first year, so we had a little less control over who would be on our stage. We were kind of we were less prepared to know how to handle these situations. And we had a speaker who had a great talk and who is a great storyteller. He's an amazing storyteller, and he's a good friend of mine. So I know he won't mind me sharing this story, but he never told us the same talk twice. It was never the same talk. There were parts where we go, "Well, you left out the entire part about being on top of the mountain with the can of fuel on your back while he was hiking the Continental Divide Trail." Um, and and lightning all around and you were afraid of blowing up. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell that part. Well, that's one of the best parts of your whole story. What did you The day of the event, he gave a completely different version than we'd heard before. His ending was completely different. It was still really good. Like we were happy with it, but I was like, we're not doing that again. We are not having that. I will tell you, I've talked to other TEDx organizers who have literally said, if I'd had a hook, I'd have pulled this person off stage, and we're not gonna submit their talk. They do not get a talk on our the TEDx channel with our name on it because they just completely did what we told them not to.
So it's so interesting. So you can go through all the stages, right? Get on that stage and still not be submitted to the TEDx, the main
Well,
TED, right?
even worse, we had a speaker who unfortunately didn't really listen to us. I think this person had been a TEDx speaker before and their TEDx talk had been flagged for potential pseudoscience, but it was still published. But we put this person on stage at our TEDx a couple of years later, and I think because they were worried, because I think they thought, well, I'm gonna show TEDx potentially. I don't know if that's the
Mhm.
case. They hired several other coaches that kept contradicting everything we told them to do. Eventually, they showed up on stage with a talk that was okay, but not really what we wanted. But we didn't. They had mostly followed the rules, so we put them on our stage. TEDx refused to publish their video, citing that they had been cited for pseudoscience before, and there was just too much pseudoscience in this one, and they weren't willing to publish it. And that angered that speaker very much, as you might imagine. You put all that work in, but yeah, if you don't follow the rules, you either might not get submitted, or we might edit something out that you've said that was you were told not to say, or you might have TEDx just flat out say we're not going to publish you.
So when you say pseudoscience, like what are some of the examples for people watching us?
It's a good question. This would be science that isn't backed by major amounts of research. And I say that, and I want you to understand what TEDx considers pseudoscience might not be the quote legal definition of pseudoscience. TEDx seems to err on the side of proven science, like proven, settled science, where there's not questions and people are. So I've seen people say, well, it's being studied at Johns Hopkins. And I say, well, that's great, but it's not anywhere else yet. And it's not something that there's a major amount of research, or you can't go get a PhD in it. So I've seen speakers talk about various techniques like tapping, like
Mhm.
for
Yep. I actually,
uh,
yeah,
uh,
it's the old technique. That,
it, that doesn't typically get on the stage for TEDx. They aren't fans of putting that on their their channel. Um, Also, like people claiming that pharmaceuticals are wrong, or pharmacies are wrong, and doctors are wrong, and you should listen to some other remedy answer. Now, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong and whether those ideas should be shared or not, but they tend to be the ones that get flagged or pushed off by TEDx. I don't understand. I don't know their exact logic or their reasoning. I just read what they say, and from that, we try to follow the guidelines
Mhm.
from that. So we tend to require a bit more research when somebody wants to talk about something that's been a scientific principle, and now they're sort of questioning it or suggesting an alternative.
Interesting. So, how many times can someone be on TEDx, and how
That's
soon they can
interesting.
come back?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of greedy people. So when someone's been a TEDx speaker, I kind of don't understand why they want to keep doing it again. And mostly, I think that's just because, like, I I sort of want to be like, hey, there's other people in line. Step out of line. You already became a TEDx speaker. TEDx has taken some very strong stand against that. They've been very clear that they don't want serial speakers, people who just make it a game to figure out how many TEDx's they can get, or who are pushing because they think it gives them more credibility somewhere. Oh, I'm a three-time TEDx speaker. I can tell you from the people I know who have given multiple TEDx's that at least a good friend of mine, Katie McCleary, who gave a great talk on our stage about the power of writing by hand and why it's a better idea to write your first draft of anything by hand. And she's has the expertise and the actual research to back it up. She's given three TEDx's, and she told me that last one was she shouldn't have done it. She wishes she had stopped at two, and maybe one would have been fine. I've met people who have seven and eight, and some of them are a lot longer ago. I had to fight, and I say that in a loose way. I had to fight for somebody who had been on our stage and given a TEDx talk somewhere else like 6 months before us, but it was about a completely different topic. And they just immediately said her name is she's already given a TEDx talk within a year. We won't publish her video. And I had to go to them and say, it's about a completely different topic. Can you not see that these topics are absolutely different? She's not giving the same TEDx, and she's not like, it's not even the same realm. She's completely separate. And they finally looked at it and said, you're right, we'll let her go. But they've made a bigger push the last couple of years to really say no serial speakers. Don't put somebody on the stage that was just on the stage a year, 2, 3 years ago.
Interesting. So it's one in a lifetime chance, right? Potentially. So you mentioned earlier that I mean, I guess your team is looking for people in the community. So how do you find them?
So, I always pushed during my 8 years as the licensee and co-organizer to find people in our community. The hard part is we'd find somebody with what we knew would be a compelling story, and we'd say, "Do you want to be a TEDx speaker?" And they go, "I don't know, what is that?" Well, if the person doesn't know what it is and doesn't have a desire to do it, it's hard to convince somebody to spend 6 months planning a 10-minute talk. Like, it's just really hard to do. Um, and we've had a number of speakers that we've really failed because of that. I've wanted for the longest time to find somebody who's created a values-based business. Probably the most famous values-based business in the United States would be like Chick-fil-A, the restaurant that bases a lot of their decision making on their religious belief, um, or at least, or like Hobby Lobby, which is a big craft store. But they tend to market themselves as having a very specific value. I wanted a company like somebody who had done that, but not necessarily with one of those organizations, and maybe not necessarily a religious bent, but somebody who had created a company based upon very specific values, so much so that maybe those values led the company more than profit did. And I know there are businesses out there, but I had three different people that I tried to get on our stage, and they each just had a reason why they weren't able to join us for whatever reason. Um, One of my favorite speakers that we ever put on stage, her name is Diane Thomas, and she did a talk that eventually got called by TEDx because they made her an editor's pick. She did a talk called "How to Help a Loved One with Cancer," and she had gone through cancer treatment herself. And I just heard her talking about some of the things that she wishes people had done better because she knew they meant well, but they didn't do well by the way they said things or treated stuff. And it turns out I had done every single thing that she was talking about to her when she had cancer. And we convinced her after 3 years to get onto our stage and tell us what it's like to go through cancer and all the things that she wishes her friends would have done or said during that time and how it really would have helped someone with cancer. And it was amazing. Her talk is just beautiful and helpful, extremely helpful. But it just took us 3 years to get her on the stage. So, we look for people who have a really compelling, interesting story, and then we figure out how we can convince them to spend the time and effort to really make an impact. And I know she's very happy that she did it. Diane, who gave that talk about cancer, I know that she probably wouldn't do it again because of the time commitment.
That's amazing. So before we start wrapping up, if you can give one last piece of advice for our viewers.
Absolutely. Remember, and this is so totally important, if you want to give a TEDx talk, I applaud you. I think it's a great idea. I don't even care why you want to give a TEDx talk. It makes no difference if it's because you have this high-minded idea to change the world, or if you're trying to build a resume as a thought leader or trying to get traction for your book or whatever reason it is. There is no wrong reason to want to give a TEDx talk. I have no issues with everybody who wants to give it. If you want to do that, I want you to do better when you apply. And that means you need to read those applications carefully. And you have to realize that you're competing against hundreds of other people. And you have to make your idea interesting. It's got to bam at the very beginning. It's got to be where somebody reads it and goes, oh, I want to know more about this. So that means it needs to be a little bit maybe controversial or kind of like in your face. Or maybe it needs to be just so specific about such a specific thing that I'm like, wow, this is so interesting that I want to know more from this person. And it's got to be right from the first moment that you write that first sentence explaining what you want to do. So it can't be generic. It's got to grab attention. I use the word, it's got to be sexy, but I don't mean necessarily romantic or physical. I don't mean what the word means. Just the idea that it's got to really get someone to go, oh, interesting. I need to know more. It's got to grab my attention to be attractive to me. Also, if you apply one place and you get rejected, the next time you apply somewhere, maybe do a little iteration, try to change it up a little bit, try to figure out what maybe you didn't do right and maybe adjust it, think about it, and give it to some friends. Ask them to say to them, here's my first sentence. Would this grab your attention and make you want to watch this video? And if they say no, then ask them, how do you adjust that to make it something you're excited about or they're excited about to grab your attention. So I had someone who wanted to talk about redefining what success is. I want to his talk was, let's redefine success. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, my parents had a specific idea of what success was, and it doesn't work anymore. And it's not what I think success is. And I said, well, what if your idea was your parents' idea of success is wrong? I said, if you send that to me as an idea, I got to read more because I got to know if you know what in the heck you're talking about. And that would require you defending. It's the same idea, but it's told in a sexy way. So you have to really do that to get someone's attention because you're competing with hundreds of other people. And otherwise, you're just going to bang your head against the wall trying to figure out why you didn't get in with a generic idea.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. It was amazing. A lot of useful information. Well, now I'm a little worried because you'll get a lot of calls and emails after this conversation. But if people want to reach out, if they want to talk to you, get coaching, be on your newsletter list, where they can find you.
Oh, I've tried to make it easy. My name is Timothy Totten, Totten. Unfortunately, it only rhymes with the word rotten, so that's not real great. But timothytotten.com, super easy to find me. You'll find all the other crazy stuff I do because I also have a YouTube channel where I teach sewing to people. It's crazy. And I am an expert on the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. So you can find all that stuff there, but you can find my TEDx coaching stuff there. I give 30-minute sessions with anybody who wants one. That's a free thing. You can just join my calendar when there's time. So you literally could just say, hey, Tim, I heard you on the podcast. You just go on there, click a time. Let's chat for 30 minutes. I don't mind giving that away for free because I want everyone to just be a little bit better. So I can give you some of my advice. And then if you want to hire me later, great, but you don't have to. I can help pretty much everybody in 30 minutes, at least get the basic idea, just like I did here with you, give us some real insider knowledge. So if somebody says, hey, is this idea work? Within 30 minutes, I can sort of help them figure out how to make that idea just a little better and give them a little bit of a leg up. I'm always happy to do that. And you can just find me on social media as Timothy Totten. I'm all over.
Thank you. You're so amazing. It was great. And thank you for being here with us. And thank you guys for watching. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you and have a good night.
Okay. Are we good?
Mhm.
Oh, still going.